The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Nova Society, or welcome to the Nova Society if you're a new listener. Today, I'm here with my panel. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm the host. Here with me is Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. So today, I thought I'd ask each of you what's happening in the news that you find most compelling and most concerning. So, Scott, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So today's Friday as we're recording this, right? It's Friday, April 4th, and it is the beginning of the second quarter of the year. And I think most probably I'm going to say most economists would say that usually for the first quarter of a president's presidency, he's still operating or she is still operating on the last president's economy, because they've not done anything to change the economy. You know, yes, there have been layoffs, but there was a jobs report today, and those government layoffs have not appeared in the jobs report, which was a very good jobs report. So I think only 4,000 federal workers, according to the jobs report, were laid off at the time they did the report, gathered the material for the report. So really, we're at the end of the Biden economy and the beginning of the Trump economy. And Trump, in a big way, on Wednesday, declared what his economy was going to be all about. And it was about something that he's calling tariffs, which are not actually tariffs. Tariffs are something that you put on a product, like steel or automobiles. These were calculated to address discrepancies in buying habits of different countries. So do we have a trade surplus with the country, or do we have a trade deficit with the country? If we have a deficit, he's got some kind of crazy formula that subtracts the number of sales that we make to them to the trade deficit, divides by 4 or something like that, and then comes up with a number which he then cut in half, because, as he said, he's a kind man in a kind country, and that's where he came up with what he's calling tariffs. And when he was announcing these on Wednesday afternoon, he kept saying, we're going to charge them 25% in this tariff. But we know that, first of all, tariffs are on products, not countries. And second, you don't charge the country, you charge your consumers. What I've been most interested in since then is different theories about what this all is and what it's all about. But I'll let Mark comment and then come back to that.
Yeah, and of course, you know my feelings on tariffs. Tariffs are very, very good if you are starting a new industry and you want to keep foreign goods out to allow that new industry to grow. And that's really what tariffs are for. So was there a lot of tariffs back when the United States was first founded? Absolutely, because there were industries, and there were other countries that were way ahead of us industrially and in many ways agriculturally, and tariffs were put on, and that was basically to make it worthwhile for the industrialist or the artisan in the United States to compete, because of the cost of getting the materials, the cost of startup. So tariffs are good with that. It encourages people to buy from the person that's down the street. There's no doubt about that. But when everything is established, tariffs are just, that's not what they're used for. And Scott's correct. They're basically a tax on the consumer. The cost of the tariff is passed on. When we start looking at some of the responses, and we're starting to see a lot of responses from the EU, we're seeing responses from Canada, we're seeing responses from China. The response is really reciprocal. they're beginning to basically say, okay, you want to do this? We'll do the same to you. And they're also starting to say, guess what? We can go someplace else. We could just cut you out of the loop. And I think that's something that a lot of people have to understand, that we could be simply cut out of the loop. And once these trade, routes are established and these trade agreements are established between these countries and we're not part of them, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get back into that market and get back into the group, if you would. So sometimes you can call it not a tariff, as Scott says, but if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and it's got feathers like a duck, it probably is a duck. And yeah, you can call it what you like, but the fact is it's a tariff, and the tariff is on the consumer.
Excuse me, I wanted to add something and then ask a question and make a couple of points and then ask a few questions. Yeah, as you were both saying, the whole concept of what Trump is doing is both insane and asinine, and the farmers from the first Trump go around are still recovering and never have fully recovered because the for example, the soy farmers in the United States who were having their soybeans purchased by the Chinese, that the Chinese began to purchase their product from the Brazilian market, and the Chinese never returned to the American farmers. So there was never a full recovery of the American market, and the U.S. aid, which has now been completely destroyed, was the other large purchaser of the American farmer's product, and now there may not be any purchaser for the American farmer's product. The other thing that I just it just passes my understanding is where the numbers originated from in the first place. So apparently Vietnam is being charged over 40% tariff on whatever as a country, because Vietnamese apparently charge us, the United States, 90%. And that, from what research I've done, is apparently incorrect. The levy that Vietnam has on American products is 9%. And now, of course, the amount that they're being charged is completely outrageous. The tariffs have also been levied on the McDonald Island, and there's another island that neither of those islands actually has any people on it. They're populated by penguins and other animals. I mean, it's farcical on the one hand, because it's so slipshod and poorly managed, and just like throwing confetti or garbage into the air, and but people are being massively hurt by this. The markets are way down, and my feeling with Trump being supported by Vance and supported by Bessette, is it? Whatever his name is, saying, well, countries shouldn't retaliate and everybody needs to draw breath, and if you retaliate, it's going to be worse. I don't see Trump backing away from this. What are your thoughts? I think he's going to keep going. He doesn't seem to care about the markets. He doesn't seem to care about anything except pushing forward with this. And I don't see what his end goal is. And as you said, we Americans, as I understand it, South Korea, China, Japan, seem to be gathering together to create their own market space. I mean, as people redo their own configurations, they're not interested in the United States anymore. We're not a trustworthy ally anymore. We're not a friend anymore. We're a rogue nation now. No one is going to want to deal with us. Nobody wants to deal with North Korea, for example. Who's going to want to deal with us?
So a couple of things, about what you said. First of all, anybody in the administration who's saying you need to trust this president needs to take a look at how sloppy, as you point out, the work that this administration has done on pretty much everything that they've tried to do has been. I mean, the sloppiness of the national security team, was evident a couple of weeks ago from their using the what was it called again? App that they were using to talk.
Signal?
Signal.
Yeah,
Signal.
Signal, right, Signal. And I've tried so hard to not say Signal Gate. That was like incredibly sloppy stuff. And now after that, the facts since then, we've found out that Waltz actually uses Gmail for sensitive conversations, which is, doubly insane. They're picking up people on the streets and sending them to El Salvador to the prison has been proven to be very sloppy. They've sent several women down there, and there's no women's prison there. They've sent people who are not gang members down there based on the fact that they're, have tattoos and or other really subjective criteria to send these people down to this prison. The sloppiness of putting on that list island countries that aren't even populated is just typical of this administration that doesn't really seem to know what they're doing. And to your other point, where you use the term charge tariffs, we are not charging Vietnam tariffs for anything. We've put a tariff on goods coming in from Vietnam, which are going to be paid by the importers of those goods, and will likely turn around and charge the retailers and then the customers for those goods. So a tariff is usually something that you put on a good, not on a country. And the way that he calculated this sweeping tariffs on, let's say, Vietnam, to use your example, was not to actually understand what the tariffs are for US products entering Vietnam, but to look at the trade deficit between us and Vietnam. Vietnam buys very, very little from the United States of America. We can probably look that up, but we get quite a lot of goods from Vietnam, mainly because China, to avoid tariffs in the first Trump administration, moved a lot of its businesses to Vietnam. So we're really still dealing with Chinese companies operating in Vietnam who are providing the cheap goods that we've gotten used to here over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm going to, Mark, if you don't mind, just take
please.
a couple of seconds because there have been several theories in answer to what Brooke was questioning, which is, what is the end game here? And yes, China put 35%, I think it was, tariffs on United States goods coming into China. They will ban the use of the buying of American products here. Their government can do that to people because they are a communist country and the central government controls all the commerce there. So they can say, you from now on, you will not buy US soybeans or cars or whatever it is. And they will obey that order, and so we will not be selling into China anymore, which is obviously an enormous market. So that's a problem. But I think the bigger thing here is hinted at this idea that he wants to replace income tax with these charges. And when you understand that it's US consumers who are paying them, I'm back to this idea that Trump likes a rentier state. He wants us to be a rentier state. Rentier states usually have some kind of natural resource, right? Petrostates tend to be rentier states where the national government, the centralized government, controls the oil companies, controls whatever it is that they're extracting from their lands, and then doles out that money to people as it sees fit. Venezuela was a rentier state, not really a socialist state, more of a rentier state. and their government would give the people a share in the national wealth as it saw fit. And when the oil market collapsed in 2014, Venezuela found itself in big trouble, and that's where they are now. That's how they got there. The natural resource that America has, that the United States of America has, that other countries don't have, is us, the consumer. We are the natural resource. And we saw this in 2021 and 2022 when prices were very high, when oil prices were high, the pump was high. There were people getting on their phones and complaining about high gas prices while they were sitting on their boat in the Long Island Sound or off the coast of Fort Lauderdale or in Lake Havasu or wherever. And they didn't seem to care about buying that gas. They just wanted to complain about the cost of it, but they dealt with it. And I heard somebody on the radio this morning on Bloomberg saying that we know that US consumers are very, very open to paying more prices. Nobody likes it, but they pay it, right? We may not buy as much stuff as we would like to buy, but we're willing to go along with it. And that makes us a big fat target for somebody who, let's face it, loves adulation, loves people groveling at his feet, loves to be the one who gives out the favors. And that's Trump, right? Completely. And that's what he's doing to the law firms. That's what he's doing to tech companies. He is forcing it to schools, colleges, right? He's forcing them to come to him and deal with him. And he's doing the same thing now to us. And, we don't have a voice speaking for us unless it's Bernie Sanders or Chris Murphy or, whoever, Ocasio-Cortez. We don't have a single voice speaking for us, but he is going to make us pay. And we are going to have to swear our loyalty to him to get out of it, this is extremely centralized, authoritarian, autocratic rule 101 that he is doing right now. And it's not, again, these are not actually tariffs, technically speaking, but they are a means of getting people under his control.
And to head back to Vietnam really quick, just for context to what we're talking about with Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the top 10 trading partners with the United States. In 1995, the trade grew from $451 million, that was in 1995, and is now nearly $124 billion in 2023. So there's been quite an uptake. There is a trade deficit with Vietnam. In other words, the United States imports more from Vietnam than it exports to them. And the top exports from Vietnam to the U.S. include phones and the accessories, computers, electronic products, machinery, equipment, textiles and garments, footwear, wood, and wooden products. All things that the United States consumer wants. All things that I'm not saying that we cannot make here, but when we're talking about computers and we're talking electronic products, we were talking about chips, the CHIPS program, that was taken away. That was to make us more, give us that ability to have the infrastructure to be able to maybe cut back this deficit a little bit. Instead of buying a computer or a phone from Vietnam, you'd be buying it from the United States because we had the capacity to make it here. And that really was what the CHIPS program was, to get some of that semiconductor business back to the United States. So the problem that I have with all of this is, and nobody seems to know exactly, as Brooklyn pointed out, what the end game is. Now, Scott makes a very good point about a rentier state. That's what he's trying to create, a rentier state, which is very, very possible. Absolutely possible. But what the end game, because there doesn't seem to be any logic. Why would you? And J.D. Vance was on the other day, and he says, we've always been taken advantage of, blah 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 blah, and now we're going to flip it on its head. We're going to flip the economy on its head. And nobody seems to understand that the economy, you just can't flip on its head. You can't do that because the economy is complex. And we were talking earlier before we got onto this about a thing called systems thinking. And I encourage everybody to kind of look at that. The economy is a system. You've got to understand all the parts. You've got to understand how they interact. You've got to understand the influence one has upon another. There are going to be some major, components of that system, but even the smallest component can have a detrimental impact to the overall whole. And if you're going to, revamp something, you've got to do it in a systematic way. And it does not seem, we basically just burnt down the house and said, okay, now we're going to rebuild. So while we're rebuilding, people, you're homeless. That's kind of the way it works. The idea of trying to figure out exactly what they're trying to do, to me, that's the biggest problem.
I was thinking about, Mark, when you were speaking, it's like a spider's web. You jiggle, well, I mean, a person couldn't, obviously, because the whole web would fall apart. But if a strand is jiggled in one location, you're going to jangle another strand of the web someplace else. I mean, the whole web is interconnected, and no part can be moved or wiggled without jangling the whole thing, which is how the spider knows that something is caught in the web. I also wanted to say that Trump continues to lie. Yesterday, and I finally was smart enough to save some of the links, at least, to what I've been listening to. Trump continues to lie, and he continues to say that Honda is building a new plant in Indiana for vehicles, that Trump's already bringing back jobs. He's already bringing back jobs. No, he's not. Honda is going to be building its new Civic at the existing plant in Indiana rather than building it in Mexico. That is true. Whether that will bring new jobs or whether it's all automated, I have no idea, but they are not building any new plants in Indiana. Trump also said that a new steel plant, there's going to be new steel jobs. Well, the plant, I looked it up. U.S. Steel has just broken ground in, I want to say, Arkansas. It's either Arkansas or Alabama. I want to say it's Arkansas. And it's like it's the first of its kind in the world, and it's eco-friendly something. That was under Biden. Biden gave them a grant, I believe, to construct a green steel plant. It has taken all this time, years, for U.S. Steel to find a location for the plant, and they've just now, I believe, broken ground. That is not Trump doing anything to bring back steel. That was Biden, and of course Trump has taken credit for it. In the meantime, I was listening to Michigan State Senator I was on the Bulwark program. 900 people in Michigan have lost their jobs as of the announcement of tariffs on April 2nd. Stellantis, the auto manufacturer, has already cut jobs and is closing plants, I believe, in Mexico and Canada as a result of this. There are going to be fewer jobs available because there's not going to be the amount of steel needed in various industries because of the tariffs. People are not going to be buying cars. They're not going to be making various purchases. France has said that they want to stop all large investments that they were planning on making in the United States. So there's been a real, as Scott, I think you were saying, response. And I think there should be. As much as I hate to say it, because the American consumer is going to suffer and none of us voted for this, but I think there needs to be, and it needs to continue. It's the only way that this is going to stop. And there was a bipartisan movement in the Senate to take back tariff control from Trump, but it's got to go to the House, as I understand, and I don't know if that's going to pass the House. So that's
unlikely. Yeah, it's unlikely that the House would even take it up. The Senate's not gonna take it up either. But even if it did, they would never. The House would never take it up. So that's not going to happen.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com.